Scientology expose trapped in the closet turned chef into a casualty of war. Isaac Hayes walked away from the show after Trapped in the Closet, and depending on who you believe, it was either his decision or the church made the decision for him. Either way, South Park lost one of its best characters because they decided to go nuclear on Scientology's beliefs. The episode didn't just mock Scientology, it literally explained their origin story with a disclaimer that said, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." They put the whole Xenu volcano alien thing on blast in primetime. The church was not happy, allegedly tried to get the episode pulled, and when that didn't work, suddenly Isaac Hayes had a problem with the show's content. After years of being fine with every other religion getting roasted, Parker and Stone didn't back down though. They killed off Chef in the most disrespectful way possible the next season, basically turning him into a brainwashed cult member who falls off a bridge, gets mauled by animals, and then poops himself. It was brutal. It was petty. It was exactly what you'd expect from South Park when someone tries to tell them what they can't do. The Scientology episode remains one of the show's most infamous moments, not because it was their most offensive work, but because it actually had real-world consequences. A main character left, relationships ended, and the show still refused to apologize. School shootings. Made an episode where school shootings happen so regularly that everyone just treats them like minor inconveniences. Kids get shot in the background while the main characters have normal conversations. It's the ultimate dark comedy move, taking something horrific and playing it for absurdist laughs. The controversy here split into two camps. One side said the episode normalized gun violence and made light of dead children. The other side argued that was exactly the point. American society has normalized school shootings to the point where we barely react anymore. The episode was holding up a mirror, not celebrating the reflection. Timing made it worse. School shootings aren't some abstract concept anymore. They're regular news, so when South Park treats them with complete apathy in the episode, it hits different depending on whether you think they're mocking society's response or just being edgy for shock value. The absurdist humor is so extreme that it's hard to tell if they're making a statement or just pushing boundaries because they can. Kids literally step over bodies to get to class. Sharon shoots up a grocery store out of frustration. It's so over the top that it becomes almost meaningless, which might be the point, but that doesn't make it less controversial. AIDS jokes, tonsil trouble. Cartman getting AIDS and then joking about it for an entire episode is peak South Park how far can we go energy. The episode didn't just reference AIDS, it made it the entire punchline. Cartman contracts it, then accidentally gives it to Kyle, and somehow this becomes a running gag about Magic Johnson's supposed AIDS cure. People were not okay with this. AIDS jokes feel dated and cruel in a way that's hard to defend. The disease killed millions, devastated communities, and still carries stigma. Making it a cartoon punchline felt tasteless even by South Park standards. The show's defense was probably that they weren't mocking AIDS victims, but rather using the disease to show Cartman's awfulness and society's weird relationship with celebrity illness. Magic Johnson living with HIV while others die became part of the satire. But that's a thin line when the jokes themselves just sound like AIDS punchlines with no deeper meaning. Even fans who defend everything South Park does often struggle with this one. It's not that it's too offensive for television, it's that the offense doesn't feel earned. There's no real target except the disease itself, and that's just punching down. Hey, by the way, I'm posting pretty consistently here, so it would mean a lot if you could subscribe to the channel and drop a like for the algorithm. Gay slurs, an LGBTQ satire. Tried to reclaim a slur by saying it should mean annoying motorcycle riders instead of gay people. The entire premise was that words can change meaning. So calling someone the F-slur shouldn't be homophobic if you're using it differently. South Park basically tried to pull a linguistics argument in cartoon form. Critics immediately called nonsense. You can't just decide a slur doesn't mean what it means anymore, especially when that word has been used to hurt and demean LGBTQ people for decades. The episode might have had good intentions about language evolution, but the execution felt like it was giving people permission to use harmful language without consequences. Supporters argued the episode was actually defending gay people by separating them from the insult. The kids in the show explicitly say they don't mean gay people when they use the word. They mean loud, obnoxious bikers. But impact matters more than intent, and the impact was basically, here's a way to justify using slurs. The controversy became about whether satire can rehabilitate harmful language or if it just normalizes it. South Park came down on one side, a lot of people came down on the other. And the debate is still going because the episode touches on something genuinely complicated about language, power, and comedy. Kanye West and gay fish got turned into a joke about not getting a joke. The episode made a fish stick pun. Kanye's character couldn't understand it, and somehow this became a whole storyline about his ego being so massive he can't comprehend basic humor. Then they made him literally a gay fish at the end because he couldn't accept he wasn't in on the joke. Kanye was not amused. He responded in interviews and songs calling it disrespectful and saying the show crossed a line, which to be fair, they kind of did. It wasn't just satire about celebrity culture anymore. It was a personal attack disguised as satire. They weren't mocking celebrities like Kanye. They were mocking Kanye specifically. The episode works as comedy because Kanye's ego is famously large, but it stops being satire when the entire joke is just Kanye is stupid and can't understand things. That's not clever social commentary. That's just bullying someone famous on television. South Park has made careers out of mocking celebrities, but this one felt different because it was so targeted and mean-spirited. The gay fish thing became a whole meme that followed Kanye for years, which was probably the goal. But it also showed how South Park can weaponize their platform when they want to. Jennifer Lopez and racial stereotypes. Cartman put on a Jennifer Lopez hand puppet and performed the most stereotypical Latina caricature imaginable. The voice, the mannerisms, the exaggerated sexuality. It was every offensive stereotype rolled into one. And the episode played it straight for uncomfortable amounts of time. The defense was that the joke was on Cartman for being racist, not on Jennifer Lopez or Latinas in general. The show was satirizing how white people appropriate and mock other cultures, not actually endorsing those stereotypes. But when the stereotype is that prominent and played for laughs, the satire gets lost. Critics argued the episode promoted racist caricatures regardless of intent. You can say you're mocking racism, but if the audience is laughing at the stereotype rather than at the person being racist, you've failed. And a lot of people laughed at the hand puppet, not at Cartman's ignorance. This controversy falls into the same trap as a lot of South Park episodes. The line between mocking bigotry and doing bigotry, ironically, gets real blurry when the execution is just stereotypes with no clear target. If you have to explain why your satire isn't racist, your satire might not be working. Climate change denial was South Park's way of saying climate change was overblown nonsense. Al Gore was portrayed as a delusional conspiracy theorist warning about a threat that didn't exist. The joke was that environmentalists were fear-mongering, which turns out they weren't. Climate change became undeniable. The science solidified, the evidence mounted, and suddenly South Park's episode aged like a prediction that was hilariously wrong. They had taken a stance against climate activism, and reality proved them wrong in the most obvious way possible. Years later, South Park did something almost unprecedented. They apologized. They brought Man Bear Pig back and admitted through the show that they were wrong to dismiss climate change. Al Gore was right. The threat was real. They basically said, "We messed up" in cartoon form. This controversy is unique because it's one of the few times South Park acknowledged being on the wrong side of an issue. They built their reputation on never apologizing, never backing down, and always doubling down on offensive content. But climate change denial was a bridge too far even for them. The apology episode didn't undo the damage of the original, but it showed that even South Park has limits on what they're willing to defend forever. When reality contradicts your satire that hard, sometimes you have to admit you were wrong. China and censorship went after Hollywood's willingness to censor itself to access Chinese markets. The episode showed characters literally editing out content to appease Chinese censors, and it called out major studios for compromising artistic integrity for money. It was one of South Park's most direct political statements. China responded by banning South Park entirely. Every episode, every clip, every reference got scrubbed from Chinese internet and media. The show went from available to completely erased overnight. And Parker and Stone's response was to mock the ban, release a fake apology that insulted China further, and basically dare them to stay mad. The controversy became about free speech versus market access. Was South Park brave for criticizing China's censorship, or were they just being edgy because they could afford to? American studios can't afford to lose Chinese markets. South Park doesn't care, because they're already established and don't need that revenue. Critics of the episode said it was easy for South Park to take a stand when they had nothing to lose. Supporters said that's exactly why someone needed to say it, because everyone else was too scared. Either way, getting banned from an entire country is a pretty notable achievement in the controversy department. Britney's new look showed up in South Park right when her real-life mental health crisis was peaking. The episode depicted her being literally hunted by paparazzi and the public, culminating in her shooting herself in the head and somehow surviving. It was dark even by South Park standards. Some people praised it as brilliant commentary on how society destroys celebrities. The episode framed Britney as a sacrifice to our obsession with fame, showing how the media and public consume famous people until there's nothing left. That's pretty heavy for a cartoon. But others felt like the show was exploiting her actual suffering for shock value. Britney was going through a real breakdown in real time, and South Park made an episode about it that played her trauma for laughs. The line between satirizing how we treat celebrities and participating in that treatment got really blurry. The episode is genuinely uncomfortable to watch, knowing what Britney was actually experiencing when it aired. It might have been trying to defend her by showing how cruel the public was, but it also contributed to that cruelty by keeping her in the spotlight. Sometimes trying to criticize something while doing that thing doesn't work. Obesity and body shaming. Cartman gets relentlessly mocked for being fat. That's just a constant thing. His weight is a running joke, a source of insults, and a visual gag that never stops. Critics call it fat shaming wrapped in cartoon form. The show's defense is that Cartman's weight isn't the actual problem. His personality is. He's a horrible person who happens to be fat, and the mockery is about his behavior, not his body. But when characters constantly call him fat as an insult, that defense gets shaky. The two things become linked. Body positivity advocates argue the show promotes the idea that being overweight is inherently mockable. Kids watching South Park learn that fat people are acceptable targets for cruelty. The show might say it's satirizing something deeper, but the surface level message is just fat people are funny to laugh at. Supporters counter that comedy shouldn't have to protect everyone's feelings all the time. Cartman is a cartoon character, not a real person, and his weight is part of his visual design. Making that off limits would be limiting what comedy can do. But that doesn't address whether the show's treatment of weight contributes to real-world stigma. Police brutality and BLM satire. South Park's portrayal of police brutality uses absurd exaggeration to make points about systemic issues. Cops do ridiculous things, shootings get played for dark comedy, and the whole institution gets mocked. After 2020 and increased awareness of police violence, these episodes hit differently. Some people feel the show undermines real suffering by making police brutality into a joke. When actual people are dying from police violence, watching cartoon cops do absurd versions of that violence feels tasteless. The satire might be targeting police corruption, but it can also feel like it's minimizing the problem. Others argue that's exactly backwards. South Park exposes the absurdity of police violence by exaggerating it. The show makes clear that cops are the problem, not the victims. By making their behavior ridiculous, it highlights how ridiculous real police brutality is. The controversy intensified post-2020 because conversations about police changed. What might have seemed like edgy satire before became more sensitive when people were protesting actual police murders. South Park didn't change their approach, but the cultural context shifted around them. Cancel culture and free speech. Recent South Park seasons have gone hard against cancel culture, political correctness, and online outrage. The show treats getting canceled as the real threat to society, positioning themselves as defenders of free speech against the woke mob. This has made them heroes to some people and villains to others. Critics say the show punches down at marginalized people who are just asking for basic respect. By mocking cancel culture, South Park dismisses legitimate complaints about harmful content and gives cover to actually problematic behavior. They're defending the right to be offensive rather than engaging with why people are offended. Supporters argue South Park is one of the last shows willing to push back against performative outrage and bad faith criticism. Cancel culture does go too far sometimes, and someone needs to point that out. If every show self-censors to avoid Twitter backlash, comedy dies. The debate is basically unsolvable because it's about values, not facts. Either you think free expression matters more than potential harm, or you think preventing harm matters more than unlimited expression. South Park picked a side, and roughly half the audience agrees, while the other half is furious about it. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so please subscribe, and thanks for watching.